Good morning and welcome to Frank's School. Here's Roger the cat, feeling playful. That'll make it interesting. This is the 88th day of the 7th year first video of Frank's School. Violent protesting. I've added the word violent. I also had intended to go back to the matter. I said there's two matters before me that I want to discuss. The protesting and this dry spell. The dry spell can wait. It's still there. But I think this week I changed my mind. And I think this week I better talk about this protesting. School Strike for Climate, Fridays for Future, also known as FFF. If you want to check this out, if you want to go online and Google it or whatever, there's a way that you can find it. I think I'm going to erase stuff today. I think I don't always do that. But I deal with it. So yeah, yesterday I posed the question: do you suppose they might turn violent? Or this might turn violent, this protesting. Well, after Greta's UN speech of yesterday, it was short. It was short, but it was passionate, and she was angry. And after that speech, I suspect that it will. I even posted on Facebook, I said, I predict it's going to get violent, very violent. I don't know how soon, possibly as early as this Friday. I don't know. That I think might be a little bit early. But I think I should deal with this matter, because it'll be quite another matter if, instead of being this brave young girl doing seemingly impossible things, if people begin to fear what she is resulting from her work because of this anger which spreads, that's going to be very different. And it might happen. I don't know. I want to go back into the past just a little bit. I mentioned SDS, Students for a Democratic Society. I researched that a little bit too. These are memories that I don't really like to stir up very much. 1966, I was halfway through my college career at that point, and it was in 1966 that I think they were demonstrating pretty famously at Harvard. So I was going by these demonstrations. I knew they were going on. I did not participate, as I said. And I'll probably come back to that matter of why I did not participate. Part of it was I just didn't know. I was a kid. But anyway, that then led to the Weathermen. If you want to research this matter, it's really quite interesting. I think you would. It's history now. You know, for me, I was living it. The Weathermen. You don't need a weatherman to tell which way the wind's blowing. Was a Bob Dylan lyrics, part of the lyric to a Bob Dylan song. And a group took that name Weatherman because they were going to show which way the wind was blowing. You could also look at Patty Hearst. She fits into this period of time eventually. It was around this time that Woodstock was going on, that rock festival. That was summer of 1969. I now, I would not in any way have wanted to go to Woodstock. That is not my thing. I would have gone the opposite way. And now, it's 50th anniversary just having passed. I don't say I despise that event and those people, but so disappointing. I mean, we've got to get ourselves back to the garden was one of the songs from that, and far from doing that. I mean, my generation, look what we've done, and look what we have taught our children to do. That's what so much of this is about. And anyway, then if you also want to look at what happened in Kent State, in my mind, as I used to teach through this a little bit in public schools, I would say by Kent State, times had changed. Here, American National Guard had used live ammunition. They had killed students who were protesting, and there was such a big shock. By this time, well, I might have been back from Brazil then, but I was in Brazil from 1968 until 1971. And so I was not right in the midst of it. Had I been, things might have been different. I don't know. But in any case, that time was similar in some ways, and yet it's different. And that's one of the reasons I want to take this time this week to talk about it. Similar but different. Um, I had to suffer the nickname of a draft dodger because of the fact that I would not go to Vietnam. I would not go to Vietnam, not because I was afraid to go. It was I was not willing to kill people for a cause which was not right. But most people weren't going to stop to listen to that. It was easier to just say, "Oh, you're a draft dodger, you're scared." They weren't going to listen to that. In a way, you had to almost be braver to stand up against that movement, especially in an area like this, where I can be a little bit forgiving, maybe a lot forgiving, of people from this area who, when their country called them, they went to serve, whether it was right or wrong. They had that kind of a patriotism, leftover in some ways from World War II, which was so different. Another phrase that came from that time was a dropout. I had to suffer that nickname of I was a dropout. Yes, I certainly was. You could say that Greta, in a way, is a dropout on Fridays. She is. Yes, I pretty early decided I wasn't going to go that route and use my Harvard education to somehow empower myself or get rich. No, a dropout would be okay. Now I have these up here because I mentioned that these young people, they could maybe use a Pied Piper from my perspective, because going into the middle of cities and stuff and collecting in vast groups is the opposite of what I would do, and I think they would do better to leave. Another thing I thought about, though, is King Midas. There's a man, a former student of mine actually, who comments a little bit on Facebook with me, and he reminded me of King Midas, a man who loved his gold so much that everything he touched turned to gold, including his daughter, which was a disaster, and he lost his daughter as a result. Now, Entropia is a work of fiction. I'm rereading it right now. It's a work of fiction, and I probably should have brought it down to hold it up to show you. It's utopian, written by Dr. Samuel Alexander. He has sold the rights to make a movie out of it, a TV movie or a series, to a pretty major production company in California, I think. So you may well hear more of it. Well, in Entropia, there is an event called the Great Disruption. He discusses it as a matter of history within Entropia. The Great Disruption happened toward the end of the third decade of the 21st century, so in the late 1920s, the Great Disruption, and this is being seen from about 60 years later. And at that time, 6 martyrs managed to basically bring down it was failing anyway. I mean, the centralized economy and what it was doing to the economy, all of that was coming to a head, and it was failing anyway. But it was hastened by 6 martyrs, 4 guys from Princeton and 2 guys from someplace else, I don't know. They sort of did a suicide mission, but it ended up tipping the balance. I find myself thinking about that, because, maybe I should jump down here. It would just follow. It is much easier to disrupt something than it is to build it. And that's one of the reasons that I did not protest among the other protesters back in the late 1960s. They wanted to disrupt, and I understood their anger, but they did not have an alternative. As I say, things are a little different now, but I do want to point this much out, that it's one of the things about a centralized, high energy consuming economy and culture. It is very easy to disrupt, and it could be disrupted, I think. All right, bye for now.